بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So in the last class we took the statement or the explanation of the statement of Da'at عليه رحمة الله لا يحل لأحد أن يبيت ليلة ولا يرى أن ليس عليه ما برا كان أو فاجرا. The statement of the author Imam al-Barbahārī عليه رحمة الله, he said it's not permissible for a person to spend the night believing or viewing that he does not have an imam. Meaning, if a person has a legitimate imam, a Muslim ruler, it's not permissible for him to spend the night believing that he doesn't have a leader, whether he is righteous or sinful. So the Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he mentioned a portion from the hadith of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam that's connected to this, that the person who goes to sleep at night or he spends the night not believing that he has a legitimate Muslim ruler, فَقَدْ خَلَعَ رِبْقَةَ الْإِسْلَامِ مِنْ عُنُقِهِ, then he has thrown off the throat, or rather the noose or the rope of Islam from his throat. What was the explanation for that statement? He has thrown off the noose or the rope of Islam from his throat. Does that mean he left Islam? He apostated? Because in some wordings of the hadith, it mentions مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً, he dies the death of someone who died in Jahiliyyah. So what was intended by that statement? For those who were here. Right. He doesn't disbelieve, but what's the meaning of that? It's a grave mistake. But what was the exact ma'na, the exact meaning? And he فارق الجماعة. فارق الجماعة. He left the jama'ah, the main body of Muslims. So that was what was intended by that statement. It doesn't mean that person has apostated, but it means that he has, disconnected himself from the jama'ah of the Muslims. The point that we're going to take tonight is the statement of the author عليه رحمة الله. قال المؤلف رحمه الله والحج والغزو مع الإمام ماضٍ. So Imam al-Barbahārī عليه رحمة الله, he said, and Hajj and battling or fighting with the Imam, the Muslim ruler, is something that is continuous, it's ongoing. وَصَلَاةُ الْجُمُعَةِ خَلْفَهُمْ جَائِزَةً, and praying behind them is permissible, meaning the Muslim authority. وَيُصَلِّ بَعْدَهَا سِتَّ رَكَعَاتٍ, and after that, meaning after Salatul Jumu'ah, a person prays or performs 6 units of prayer, sit raka'at. يَفْصِلُ بَيْنَ كُلِّ رَكَعَتِينَ, and he separates between these raka'at for every 2. He separates, with every 2 units, he separates like this. هكذا قال أحمد بن حنبل, and this is what was stated by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. So in the explanation, Shaykh Fawzan, he says, صلاحية الإمام كثيرة. When it comes to the jurisdiction or the authority that the Muslim ruler has, then there are many. He has a lot of jurisdiction. ومحل إحصائها وجمعها واطلاع عليها الأحكام السلطانية التي ألفت في هذا. And when it comes to these type of issues, the mandates that the Muslim ruler can give, his jurisdiction and what have you, the place where you want to find this, or where they're mentioned and where they are gathered together, are in the rulings of the Sultan. The rulings dealing with the Muslim ruler that have, and he says, التي ألفت في هذا مثل الأحكام السلطانية للماوردي. For example, the book that's entitled The Rulings of the Sultan by al-Mawardi, والأحكام السلطانية لأبي يعلى الحنبلي. And also, and he has the same name for the name of the book, The Rulings of the Sultan by Abu Ya'la al-Hanbali. وكتب ألفت في هذا فيها بيان صلاحيات الإمام. So these books that have been authored pertaining to this, clarify the mandates, the authority, and the jurisdiction that the Imam has, the Muslim ruler has. وَهَذَا مَذْكُورٌ فِي كُتُبِ الْفِقْهِ. And these things or these matters are mentioned in the books of jurisprudence. وَفِي كُتُبِ الْعَقَائِدِ أَيْضًا كَمَا هُنَا. And likewise they're mentioned in the books of creed, as is the case right here. أولا. So this is the first thing. So Shaykh Salih, Hafidhahullah, he's going to mention three things that are connected to the mandates or the authority and the jurisdiction that the Muslim ruler has. The first thing, أنه يتولى صلاة الجمعة والعيدين. The first thing is that the Imam, the Muslim authority, the Muslim leader, he is the one that's in charge of Salatul Jumu'ah. He is the one that's in charge of leading Salatul Jumu'ah in the two Eids. وَيُصَلِّي الْمُسْلِمُونَ خَلْفَهُ. The Muslims pray behind him. إِلَّا أَنْ يَخْتَارَ هُوَ. Unless he chooses someone else. وَيُخْلِفَ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ أَوْ مِنْ طَلَبَةِ الْعِلْمِ مَنْ يُصَلِّي بِالنَّاسِ. Or he chooses, someone from amongst the scholars or the students of knowledge to lead the people. He says, لَكِنَّ الْأَصْلَ أَنَّهُ أَحَقُّ بِالْإِمَامَةِ فِي الْجُمُعَةِ وَالْعِيدَيْنِ. However, the origin is that the Muslim ruler, the Muslim leader, he has more right to be in the Imam for Jumu'ah and the two Eids. What's the proof and evidence for that? It comes in the hadith. It's found in the Sahih of Imam Muslim from the hadith of Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. The Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, وَلَا يَؤُمَّنَّ الرَّجُلُ الرَّجُلَ فِي سُلْطَانِ. Al-Hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that a man is not to lead another man in prayer in his authority. In his place of authority. So Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he says, مَعْنَاهُ مَا ذَكَرَهُ أَصْحَابُنَا وَغَيْرُهُم. So al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he says the meaning of this is what our companions and other than them have said. When he says أصحابنا, he's referring to the scholars of the Shafi'iyya, the Shafi'i scholars. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah was Shafi'i in terms of his method. أن أصحاب البيت والمجلس وإمام المسجد أحق من غيره. So this means that, the head of the household, a man in his household, or the one who's over a gathering, or the Imam of a masjid has more right, he's more entitled than someone else. He's more entitled to what? To lead the prayer. وَإِنْ كَانَ ذَلِكَ الْغَيْرِ أَفْقَهُ وَأَقْرَأُ وَأَوْرَعُ وَأَفْضَلْ مِنْهُ. Even if that person, that other person has more understanding, he knows more Quran, he's more righteous, or he's better than that person. وَصَاحِبُ الْمَكَانِ أَحَقُّ إِنْ شَاءَ تَقَدَّمْ وَإِنْ شَاءَ قَدَّمَ مَنْ يُرِيدُهُ. So the person who has authority in that place, he has more right to lead the prayer. If he wants, he leads it. And if he wants, then he can get someone else to lead the prayer. He doesn't have to lead the prayer. وَإِنْ كَانَ ذَلِكَ الَّذِي يُقَدِّمُهُ مَفْضُولًا بِالنِّسْبَةِ إِلَى بَاقِي الْحَاضِرِينَ. Even if the person, for example, the head of the household, the man in his household, even if he is better than the people who are present. It might be individuals who are present and they're not as knowledgeable, they might not be as righteous or religious, but he can still do this. It's within his his choice. He can do it because it's his choice. لأنه سلطانه, because it's his place of authority. فيتصرف فيه كيف يشاء. So therefore he can do as he likes. فقال أصحابنا. So our companions have said, فإن حضر السلطان أو نائبه قدم على صاحب البيت وإمام المسجد وغيرهما. And our companions have said that if the Muslim ruler, the Muslim leader, or his deputy is present, then they are given precedence to a man in his household and the Imam of a masjid and other than them. Alright? لأن ولايته وَسَلْطَنَتَهُ عَامَّةً. And this is because his authority is general. So the origin, as Sheikh Fawzan, he just mentioned right here, is that the Muslim leader, he has more right when it comes to leading the Jumu'ah prayer and the two Eids. Even if there are people who are more knowledgeable, they're more righteous, and like this. فَإِنِ اسْتَخْلَفَ مَنْ يَقُومُ بِهَذَا فَلَهُ ذَلِكَ. So Shaykh Fawzan, he says, so if the Imam, we're talking about the Imam al-A'zam, right, the Muslim leader, if he chooses someone, he appoints someone to lead the people in prayer other than himself, then he can do that. وَهَذَا عَلَيْهِ الْعَمَلُ الْيَوْمِ. And this is what is done nowadays. When you go to Muslim countries, who's leading the prayer, for example, in the Haramain, they have a'imma, they have imams that are appointed for that. Sometimes, in the past, some of the umara, some of the princes, they might come to a masjid and they might lead the prayer, but in general, there are people who are appointed for that task. So this is the first affair, that the imam, the Muslim ruler, he is in charge in terms of leading the people in Salatul Jumu'ah and the two Eids. And the term imam, we constantly hear it being used, right? So it's very important to distinguish between the Imam al-A'zam, right, the head Imam, the Muslim ruler, the head of state, and the Imam of a masjid. Back in the day, there were some brothers, hadahumullah, they used to take some of the ahadith with regard to imara. Some of the ahadith with regard to imara is dealing with leadership. Some of the wordings of the hadith are mentioning imam. So some of them, hadahumullah, perhaps some of them have recanted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But I know personally of a situation that happened up north where there was an individual who was saying, basically the imam of the masjid, these ahadith with regard to the Muslim ruler are applied to him. So you have to listen to him, and you have to obey him, as long as it's not disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is jahl, mahr. This is straight up ignorance. It's compounded ignorance. And it's going to cause people to go astray. Because these ahadith are with regard to the Muslim leader. This imam is the imam of the Muslims. It's not the imam of a masjid. So it's very important to understand the difference between the imam that's the Muslim ruler and just the imam of a masjid. The imam of a masjid only has so much authority. ثانيا هو الذي يقيم الحج ويقود الحجيج. So the second affair in terms of the jurisdiction that the imam or the Muslim ruler has is directing the people when it comes to Hajj, directing the people who are going to perform Hajj. وَيَتَأَمَّرُ عَلَيْهِمْ. He's the one who's over them. He's the one that has authority over them. وَيَنْظُرُ فِي مَشَاكِلِهِمْ. And he's the one who looks into their, the issues that might arise or the issues that they have. ثالثا, the third affair, إقامة الجهاد في سبيل الله من صلاحيات الإمام هو الذي يأمر به. This affair right here is extremely important. The third affair is establishing jihad for the sake of Allah. Is one of the mandates that the Imam has. He's the one who commends with it. He's the one who commends with it. It's not an issue where you have vigilantes, whether they're in a Muslim country or a non-Muslim country, who just take it upon themselves to say that they're going to establish jihad. It doesn't work like that. Just look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Initially, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they were in Mecca. They were being oppressed. Right? And it's well known that there were some companions that even got killed. The parents of Ammar ibn Yasir, for example. There were companions like Bilal ibn Rabah. They were being tortured. During that phase, the Mecca phase, jihad wasn't legislated. Why wasn't it legislated? At that particular point, the Muslim Ummah wasn't strong enough. They didn't have the capability in terms of dealing with the mushrikun. They didn't have the strength and the manpower to deal with them at that point. But we see after the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba made the hijrah to Medina, then it was legislated. So you see all these different people, ignoramuses, always talking about jihad, jihad, jihad. But some of these individuals, they, if somebody was to break into the house, they might not even have a gun or anything to even protect themselves, but they keep talking about jihad. Jihad, it has guidelines. And this is what the Shaykh, Hafidhullah, is going to touch on. وَهُوَ الَّذِي يُنَظِّمُ الرَّايَاتِ. The Muslim ruler is the one who organizes, the banners when it comes to this affair. وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَخْتَارُ الْجُنُودِ وَالْمُقَاتِلِينَ. He's the one who chooses, the army and the people who are going to be fighting. وَيُؤَمِّرُ الْأُمَرَاءِ. He's the one who appoints people who are going to be like the commanders in the army, like this. وَيُجَنِّدُ السَّرَايَا وَالْجُيُوشِ. He's the one who mobilizes, the troops. وَيُسَلِّحُ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ. He's the one who arms and gives, the people who are fighting the weaponry. وَيُوَجِّهُهُمْ إِلَى غَزْوِ الْعَدُوِ. He's the one who directs them to fighting the enemy. وَيُعَيِّنُ لَهُمُ الْجِهَةَ الَّتِي يَغْزُونَهَا. He's the one who specifies where they're going to be fighting. فالجهاد من صلاحيات الإمام وليس الجهاد فوضى. So jihad is one of the mandates of the Muslim ruler. It's not an issue of chaos. It's not an issue of chaos. Some years ago, and you hear about it every now and then, perhaps in Europe, you hear about individuals, like they say they're with a shabab, and they come into the mall or somewhere where there's a lot of people and they have a little knife or whatever the case is, and just start stabbing people. Billah alaykum, where is that in the Quran and the Sunnah? Some of them I've heard, and this is I think in Minnesota or one of those states. Some guy, he was going around, before he stabbed them, he would say, "Are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim?" And then if he's not Muslim, then he's going to stab him. Where? The person who has a sound mind, a sound intellect, he's going to say to himself, where in our religion does it condone this type of behavior? Just stabbing people. They don't even know nothing about Islam. They don't even know why they're being stabbed or anything. You're just stabbing random people. This has nothing to do with Islam. This type of behavior has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. I don't care how loud these people will be on social media, how nice they look when they have their turbans tied on their head, and they got the AK-47s on their shoulders. Wallahi, that don't mean nothing. If it's based upon ignorance, wallahi, it's as though you're doing nothing. In fact, you're causing a greater harm. فالجهاد من صلاحيات الإمام وليس الجهاد فوضى. Jihad, legitimate jihad, not the jihad of ISIS and the Shabab and all these crazy people. Legitimate jihad is one of the mandates of the Muslim ruler. It's not chaos. كل من أراد حمل السلاح ويقتل ويهجم ويقول أنا أجاهد في سبيل الله هذا ليس جهاد في سبيل الله. So every person who wants to carry some weapons and kill and attack people, and he says, "I'm fighting for the sake of Allah," he says this is not jihad for the sake of Allah. الجهاد في سبيل الله منظم ومضبوط بضوابط شرعية. So jihad, real jihad for the sake of Allah, is organized and is confined to the guidelines of the legislation. أما إذا دخلته الفوضى صار تخريبا. However, if chaos, enters into this affair, then it's going to be a situation of destruction. وصار ضرره أكثر من نفعه إن كان فيه نافع. And it's going to be a situation where the harm is greater than its benefit, if there's even any benefit. فالضرر الناجم عنه أكثر. Right? The harm that's going to result from it is going to be greater. Think about all of the bad, of course some of it's propaganda from the non-Muslims, but think about all of the outlash or the backlash that have come to the Muslims as a result of these people, these vigilantes, taking upon themselves to kill non-Muslims. it's made it more difficult for Muslims. Like, you just think about some of the stuff that's happened in the last 10 years, for example. So many situations. I just mentioned one thing. Some of these guys from a shabab, going to malls and stabbing people. Yeah, a situation some years ago, it was a sister and brother in Cali, they were shooting up people. You had the situation here with a brother. Everybody knows about the situation. He went to the club and he shot up all these homosexuals. Islam doesn't have nothing to do with that. Islam has absolutely nothing to do with that. It's a religion that's organized. It's not about, this type of, person just taking upon himself and just killing people. فالجهاد أمره عظيم. The issue of jihad is tremendous. يحتاج إلى انضباط. It requires discipline. ويحتاج إلى تقيد بأحكام الجهاد المذكورة في الكتاب والسنة وكلام أهل العلم. And it also requires confining oneself to the rulings of jihad that are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, as well as the statement of the scholars. ليس الأمر فوضى. It's not a situation or an affair of chaos. بأن يأتي واحد من دعاة الفتنة ويتزعم هؤلاء الغالين أو المتطرفين أو الجهال الذين لا يدرون يتزعمهم ويقول نجاهد في سبيل الله. So, mentions like a person comes from du'atul fitna, the callers to fitna. It's a lot of them. And then, he's like the head or he's the leader for, people who are extreme. The Khawarij, these type of people. And ignoramuses. And they don't know. Right? They don't know, the rulings as it pertains to jihad. He's over them and he says, Nujahidu fi sabilillah. We're fighting for the sake of Allah. هذا يعتبر من الضرر على الإسلام والمسلمين. This is considered a harm. It's harmful for Islam and the Muslims. وليس هذا جهادا. It's not jihad. لأنه لم يتقيد بضوابط الجهاد. And this is because he did not confine himself to the guidelines of jihad. وإذا لم يتقيد بضوابط الجهاد صار فسادا وليس جهادا. So if a person doesn't confine himself to the guidelines of jihad, then it becomes corruption and it's not jihad. وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ تَجَاوَزَ حَدَّهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَنْقَلِبُ إِلَى ضِدِّهِ. Everything that transgresses its bounds, then it's going to change into the opposite. People are saying it's jihad, but in reality, it's just chaos. It's destruction. فَهُمْ يَقُولُونَ الْآنِ لِمَنْ أَنْكَرَ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنْتُمْ تَمْنَعُونَ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And perhaps some of the brothers have heard this before. These people, they say now to us, the people who say that this is not jihad, going out there and blowing up yourself and saying Allahu Akbar and then killing, a whole bunch of civilians, and you're living in a Western country and not even a Muslim country to begin with. But even if you're in a Muslim country, it's not permissible. These people, they say to those who rebuke them for this, they say, you're preventing us from fighting jihad for the sake of Allah. You're preventing us from jihad for the sake of Allah. Essentially, they're saying you're preventing us from carrying out the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These individuals, they might be reiterating the ahadith with regard to the virtue or the ayat, about the person who dies in the path of Allah and so on and so forth. And they say, you're preventing us from getting that reward. Right? نقول نحن لا نمنع الجهاد في سبيل الله. So we say we're not preventing jihad for the sake of Allah. لكن نقول لا بد أن ينضبط الجهاد بضوابط الشرعية. However, we say it's imperative that jihad is confined to the guidelines of the legislation. وما تعملونه هذا فوضى وليس جهادا. And what you guys are doing is chaos. It's not jihad. وَاللَّهُ لَمْ يَأْمُرْ بِهَذَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not command us with this. فإقامة الحج والغزو والجمعة والعيد من صلاحيات ولي الأمر. So therefore, when it comes to leading Hajj and battles, jihad we're talking about, and Jumu'ah and the Eid is something that's from the mandate of the Wali al-Amr, the Muslim ruler. Now some people, they might get confused when it comes to the issue of jihad ad-dafi'. Jihad ad-dafi'. So the jihad that Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan is talking about is when the Muslims are fighting against the non-Muslims. When the Muslim authority declares jihad against, a country or people that are not Muslim. That requires a Muslim ruling. Jihad ad-dafi' is when a person is being attacked by non-Muslims. It can happen sometimes in a Muslim country. Maybe a non-Muslim country is attacking them. For example, what happened in the 80s with Afghanistan, the Russians were fighting against, they called them the Mujahideen at the time. They were fighting them. This is considered jihad ad-dafi', when the Muslims are defending themselves. Even it comes in the hadith, "Man qutila duna malihi fahuwa shaheed." Whoever is killed defending his property, then he's a shaheed. If a person, for example, is outside and someone tries to attack him, he's a non-Muslim, you're a Muslim, and then you're defending yourself, and you happen to kill that person, there's no blame on you at that point. And if you're killed in that situation, you're considered a shaheed. You consider a martyr. Now, can it be said for this person? Because when it comes to the shuhada, when it comes to who a martyr is, there's detail with regard to that. But for example, if a person is killed like that, a Muslim brother is out and about, and then he's attacked by a non-Muslim, and this happens sometimes. We hear about even some brothers are imams here in the States being killed. Is it correct to say that fulanun shaheed? That person is a shaheed. He's a martyr. And if so, what's the reason? State the reason. And if not, what's the reason? Huh? طيب لماذا؟ Why? نعم. Yeah, if a person, for example, just even if he's not defending his part, he's just defending his life.
There is a hadith about guy who's in Ghazwa and has been killed. The Sahaba said this one might be shared. Because his intention, he wanted to.
No. So the scholars, they mentioned that you can't say that a specific person is a shaheed. You can't say that. You can say, for example, we hope that he's a shaheed. Right? We hope that he's a shaheed. But the reality is, you don't know what's in the person's heart. Maybe he was a munafiq. You don't know. So unless it's established in the book of Allah, or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that the Prophet ﷺ said, Fulanun shaheed. For example, in the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ was on Mount Uhud, and he said, with me is Siddiq and 2 martyrs. Who was he talking about? Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. So he basically bore fact to the fact, he bore a witness to the fact that they are going to be martyrs. So this is a text now. Now you have a text from the Sunnah. It establishes that they were shuhada. But for anyone else, and there's no revelation with regard to that individual, then you can't say fulanun shaheed. You can't say that. Because you don't know if the person was even Muslim to begin with. You can say, we hope that he's a shaheed, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts him as a shaheed, but the reality is, we don't know in which state he met his Lord. And this is a very common issue. It's a very common issue. Even now in the situation, most recent situation in Gaza, you always hear about different Muslims getting killed and they say fulanun shaheed. It's not correct. It's not correct. You have to put your emotions to the side. You have to put your emotions to the side. Now, in terms of the children, we know there's a hadith with regard to the children that died before the age of puberty. With regards, actually there's consensus amongst the scholars that the children that died, the Muslim children, whose parents were Muslim, and they died before the age of puberty, then there's consensus that they're min ahli jannah. They're going to be in the inhabitants of paradise. But in terms of someone else that's above, puberty, they're in puberty, and they're older and like this, and then they're killed like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best in terms of their final outcome. inshallah. The next point is with regard to Salatul Jumu'ah khalfahum ja'iza. Performing the prayer behind them, meaning the Muslim ruler, is permissible. And we'll take that next class, bi-idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.